Hello, a very good morning. You're watching Sky News. Let's get you up to date with our top stories here today. And a major global IT outage is hitting businesses worldwide, including here at Sky News. It's impacting airports and grounding flights. The London Stock Exchange is amongst businesses affected, and we're hearing that automated boarding scanners at Edinburgh Airport are also offline. Rail companies have told customers to expect delays, with all four of the Govia Thameslink brands experiencing problems. Now, the system failure is believed to have been caused by a flawed antivirus update, although nothing has as yet been confirmed. And just to let you know that you can keep up to date with all the very latest on our website and on our app. We've got a live blog there with all the very latest developments.
Yes, that's constantly being updated. But let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories now. Donald Trump has addressed the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee 5 days after surviving that attempt on his life. In a speech lasting more than an hour and a half, Mr. Trump formally accepted the party's nomination to be president. He spoke at length also about the incident last weekend and outlined some of his key campaign promises.
There's growing pressure on Joe Biden this morning to pull out of the race for the White House, with reports suggesting that both Barack Obama and former Speaker Nancy Pelosi have now expressed concerns about his re-election bid. More than 22 Democrats have now publicly called for their leader to step down. Well, the president is currently carrying out his day-to-day duties in isolation after he was diagnosed with COVID while he was on the campaign trail in Las Vegas.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer will host the Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in Downing Street later today. The Ukrainian president will address the cabinet on the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. It will be the Prime Minister's first time hosting a foreign dignitary since winning the election last month, and in fact the first time that a sitting president has addressed the cabinet since Bill Clinton back in 1997. The meeting comes after 44 European countries and the European Union agreed to disrupt Russia's so-called shadow fleet, which sees vessels carrying around 1.7 million barrels of oil a day.
West Yorkshire Police has promised to bring the full weight of the law on those responsible for starting a riot in Leeds overnight. Sky News has witnessed firsthand the shell of a double-decker bus which had been burnt out, as well as a police vehicle which had been flipped over. The violent scenes reportedly began after police responded to a disturbance which involved agency workers as well as some children. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says that she's been left appalled by the scenes of unrest.
Some pricing news for you now, because a mini heatwave is set to hit parts of the UK. Temperatures could reach up to 31 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country. A yellow heat alert is in force for London, the East Midlands, the South East and also Eastern England. That will come into effect at 5 p.m. today and continue until 11 p.m. tomorrow evening. It's not for long, though, the cooler weather returning to us on Sunday.
At least one person has died and 10 others injured in a drone strike on Israel's Tel Aviv. Israel's military says they're investigating the attack and why their defence systems failed to intercept the drone. Yemen's Houthi group has claimed responsibility for the strike.
Internet and mobile phone services in Bangladesh have been cut off after several days of violent protests that have left at least 39 people dead. The demonstrators are demanding an end to a system that reserves up to 30% of government jobs for relatives of veterans who fought in Bangladesh's War of Independence. That was back in 1971. They say that the system is unfair and mostly benefits the supporters of the Prime Minister, that's Sheikh Hasina, whose party led the independence movement. They want it replaced instead with a merit-based system. Well, Hasina's government has responded by raiding the headquarters of the main opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party, along with arresting members of its student wing.
And tributes are being paid to long-time star of the screen, Bob Newhart, who's died at the age of 94 following a series of illnesses. Newhart is best known recently for his roles in the Christmas comedy Elf, as well as regular appearances in The Big Bang Theory. His career spanned more than 5 decades, including his induction into the Television Hall of Fame back in 1993. But let's go back now to our top story and this major global IT outage, which is hitting so many businesses around the country, and there are reports of problems overseas as well. Sky News, as you will see, has had some technical problems this morning ourselves. Just to recap some of the organisations that have been affected, the London Stock Exchange, we're told, is one of the businesses that's been hit. Also at Edinburgh Airport, automated boarding scanners are being affected. And it's not just airlines, which are in some cases having to ground flights, also rail companies as well being hit too. We're told that all 4 of the Govia Thameslink brands are experiencing problems, and customers, they're saying, are being told to expect delays, essentially. We don't know the cause of this problem. It's not been confirmed as yet, but it's believed to have been caused by a flawed antivirus update, which has clearly affected so many different organisations.
Yes, and just looking at the live blog, which you can access on the Sky News website and also on the Sky News app on your smartphone or tablet, our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons saying that the effects of that computer outage being seen at airports across the UK, Schiphol in Amsterdam, one of the busiest, impacting flights to and from. They're analysing the impact there. Airports in Spain, Ryanair, the largest airline, of course, in Europe, saying it's suffering disruption across its network. They've been affected, check-in in particular for Ryanair. Meanwhile, also significantly in the United States, emergency 911 lines in the US states, certainly in Alaska, and others potentially are down there too.
Yeah, and talking of airports, our Asia correspondent Nicole Johnson is reporting, saying that the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong is reporting that an IT breakdown there has left the international airport. Their words is it's in chaos, they say. They're reporting that the check-in is being done manually and flights are still taking off, but they are talking about the airport starting emergency procedures to try to keep those flights moving. Nicole has also reported a little bit earlier that this worldwide outage was also affecting other television channels as well. It's not just here at Sky News that we've been having problems. It's also affecting Channel 10 and ABC in Australia, with Sky News Australia down. I mean, we're operating on sort of to a minimal capacity at the moment. We'll try and get guests to you to talk about this a little bit further. At the moment, the technology is not allowing us to, but we've got all sorts of people working on it at the moment.
Very much so. And there's actually a little bit of an update on the blog with regards to the potential cause of this. This potentially CrowdStrike, it's a tech support message on their website saying they're aware of reports of crashes on Windows systems. So that's computers operating the Windows operating software. The IT security firm CrowdStrike is running a recorded phone message as well, saying it's aware of reports of crashes on Microsoft's Windows operating system relating to its Falcon sensor. It says, thanks for contacting CrowdStrike support. We're aware of the issues and are working to resolve them. And Microsoft, for its part, says it's taking mitigating actions and also trying to resolve its service issues. It says that the outage started at around 11 p.m. last night, UK time, and is investigating the issues with cloud services in the United States and multiple apps and services too.
I'm just going to interrupt rudely because I think we may be able to take you to some live pictures of Downing Street right now. Here we are. Here's the scene there with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is an unusual meeting because the Ukrainian president has been invited to address the cabinet later on this morning on the latest from the battlefield. And this is the first time that a foreign leader has been invited into the cabinet to address them. Since 1997, the last person who was invited in this way was Bill Clinton back then. So it's comes after that meeting yesterday, that special European summit that was held at Blenheim Palace that Keir Starmer hosted, of course, with 45 countries turning up there. And Ukraine really was a focus for that summit, and they wanted to send out a message of support to Ukraine. And now Volodymyr Zelensky visiting Keir Starmer in Downing Street and addressing the cabinet, which is, as I say, a very unusual situation.
Very much so. We saw that meeting at Blenheim Palace, like you say, bringing together not just European Union leaders, but leaders from about 44, 45 European nations. And one of the key outcomes of that meeting was this potential shadow fleet ban. This has been proposed by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. And this is a crackdown on these shadow or dark fleets. These are fleets of Russian oil tankers. And it's said that they are transporting about 1.7 million barrels of fuel a day, and there are ways then that are allowing Russia to get its oil and gas into international markets. We've seen, obviously, as a result of that full-scale invasion of Ukraine, lots of sanctions placed against Russia, but it's using these so-called fleets to move around oil and gas, obviously then financing its continued war in Ukraine. And lots of focus of attention, I'm sure, in Downing Street right now on what more can be done, both militarily, but also financially and economically, to try and support the Ukrainians.
That's right. And I spoke to the Defence Secretary, John Healey, just a little bit earlier, and hopefully we'll be able to play out some of that a little bit later. But let's go back to this major global IT outage and all the very latest on that. As we say, a number of airlines reporting problems. Apparently, according to our reporter in India, Neville Lazarus, he says that this is also affecting the subcontinent as well. He says that airlines have suffered disruptions in their operations and a number of flights have been halted in India. And SpiceJet has put out a statement on X to say that they're currently facing a technical issue in providing updates on flight disruptions. They talk about their teams actively working to resolve this issue, and they say they regret any inconvenience caused. They will try and update everybody once it's resolved. So a message going out from a number of airlines now who are also experiencing problems. There's a message here from Akasa Air saying that due to infrastructure issues with our service provider, some of our online services, including booking, check-in and managing booking services, will be temporarily unavailable. So that's just a couple of the examples from India where there are issues. They also are saying that news channels there, NDTV and others, also went off air temporarily. Computers in newsrooms had stalled, affecting the news production, something that happened to us as well. Our computers all shut down. So I think I can bring in Tom Clark now, who is here with me. So Tom, what an extraordinary situation.
Yeah.
So we're getting a sense of the scale because I'm getting updates all the time on different organisations coming forward saying terrible IT problems, it's causing a certain amount of chaos.
That's right.
So what do we know about it?
Well, you might be able to see on the screens in our newsroom, they're blue.
Yeah.
Technical
or black.
Cyber folks even have an acronym for this. It's the blue screen of death, a BSOD, and it's a feared phenomenon because it means something's gone seriously wrong with the software that provides the services for your business, whatever they might be. As we understand it, this is a problem affecting Microsoft systems. They are obviously a globally dominant software provider, and what appears to be coming through, although there's still a lot of confusion about this at the moment, CrowdStrike, which is a company that provides cybersecurity protection for Microsoft users, were installing an update across networks, and it appears that there's some kind of glitch occurred as a result of that, which has caused systems to go down. That, as I say, we're still getting details on that to sort of confirm it, but all the indications are at the moment this is not a cyber attack of any sense. It appears to be a bit of routine maintenance that's gone badly wrong, and it seems to be gone badly wrong in multiple areas around the globe almost simultaneously. The east coast of the US had a problem overnight, but it's now seems to be, as you were saying, in Australia. Airports in Japan are having disruption as well. Other parts of Asia, Australia, including their broadcasters, as you were saying. And it just illustrates the vulnerability that we have when lots of people are working on common systems. That, to be fair, we don't notice. I mean, they're pretty complicated things. It's almost surprising these don't happen more often, but we are seeing a massive global outage and disruption to Microsoft.
And how much are the companies themselves saying about this? Are Microsoft saying anything of this
so
antivirus
far,
system?
all I'm seeing is sort of updates from technical engineers online talking about it. I don't think we've had any formal comment from these companies, but as soon as I get that, I will bring that to you. We had a statement from CrowdStrike, I believe, which I haven't got with me at the second.
Yeah.
I can bring it to you in a minute. But yes, that appears to be the situation at the moment, and it's causing time for people to recover. Interestingly, at airports, it seems the disruption is not because flights are troubled in any way. It's the display screen systems, for example, at Edinburgh Airport, and then check-in, scanning bags and check-in processes. So it's the sort of front of house stuff that's gone down, and the admin processes that's impacted that. Yeah.
Yes, so people don't have to worry about the safety, I guess. It's just the practicalities.
I think that is clear, and as we know, in things like aviation, there is a lot more redundancy in those systems, and also, if it's not safe to fly, they just won't. So that's the situation there. But as I understand it, flights are not disrupted except because of getting people on and off aircraft.
OK, and as you say, the information coming in all the time, of course, and trains also affected. But it's not just transport. There are also problems in the City of London as well. So let's cross live to our business presenter, Ian King, now. We can bring him in. Hi there, Ian. Great to see you in person there. We've made the technology work there. So what is the impact of this global IT outage there?
Well, we've had some issues on the London Stock Exchange. Very early this morning, in fact, overnight, while the Asian markets were still open, there were issues with Workplace, which is a platform, a news and data service provided by LSEG, the London Stock Exchange Group, parent of the exchange. They told users that they were having some issues there. Users reported issues, and that certainly affected the ability of some market participants to obtain quotes and details on the foreign exchange markets. We then, were around 7 o'clock our time, a message appeared on the London Stock Exchange website in which they said that they were having issues with RNS, which is the regulatory news service. It's the medium by which companies update the market with, for example, trading statements, results statements, news about directors and boardroom changes and so on. It's an absolute vital piece of the plumbing for the equity market here in London. And the exchange said that they were having issues there, technical issues that were preventing them from getting news and information up there. There doesn't appear, however, to have been an issue in terms of getting pricing data out. The market opened as usual, the equity market opened as usual at 8 o'clock. The FTSE 100 opened some 2/3 of 1% lower. In common with exchanges right across Europe, there's been a sell-off right across Europe. At the moment, probably pretty moderate. You're only talking about, as I say, 1/2 to 2/3 of 1% lower for most of the main equity indices here. The DAX in Germany, the CAC 40 in France, the MIB in Milan, they're all down by roughly the same sort of amount. But so trading appears to have got underway now, but what still appears to be a stumbling block is the ability of the exchange to get regulatory news service announcements up and running.
And can you tell us anything about CrowdStrike, this company that we understand was launching an antivirus update? No confirmation of what has happened, but can you tell us anything about that company, Ian?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a very, very big company indeed, Anna. I mean, it's listed on the NASDAQ in the United States. It's got a stock market valuation of around $83 billion. And essentially, it's a provider of cybersecurity services. It claims to be able to detect incoming attacks and enable the systems of clients to be able to sort of brace themselves against these attacks. The piece of software in question is something called Falcon Sensor, apparently, and there was an upgrade to this service going on overnight, and it appears in particular to have hit Microsoft. It spread to Azure, which is Microsoft's main cloud service, and that is why you've had these widespread outages. Now, Microsoft is saying that Azure is now back up and running, but it does appear that this particular software, this Falcon Sensor made by CrowdStrike, appears to be at the heart of all this. And ironically, there's been quite a tetchy relationship over recent months between CrowdStrike and Microsoft. CrowdStrike, on a number of occasions, has raised questions about the resilience of Microsoft systems, which is all deeply ironic in view of the fact that its own software upgrade appears to be at the heart of all these problems now.
Ian, stay with us for the moment, if you will. I want to bring in Simon Calder, who's just joined me here in the studio, travel editor of The Independent. I remembered that. So, Simon, get us up to date, because a lot of travel is affected, isn't it? It seems like airports have been affected, but also some train services as well.
Yes, and the context for this, Anna, is that this is the busiest day for flights leaving the UK since 2019. It was always going to be a really difficult
beginning of the
day.
Summer holidays.
Exactly. We needed everything to go right, and unfortunately it hasn't. Having said that, and having said that, yes, all the big airports, Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, Manchester, Edinburgh, are experiencing some problems, flights are still operating. There's a number of airlines and airports have said be prepared for longer waits at security. It's going to affect everything from the checking in system, of course, to registering who's on board a flight, getting all the data that you need in place for that flight to depart. But planes are still leaving. Even we've heard that there was a ground stop called by American, Delta and United. Well, there are actually flights going from London Heathrow to New York on United at the moment, so those are still taking off. We're probably, Ryanair is saying, and this is of course Britain, Europe's biggest low-cost airline, they are saying, right, we've got problems, nothing to do with us, but turn up 3 hours early at least. Now, confusingly, some airports are saying don't turn up any earlier than you normally would because they don't want overcrowding. Manchester says, just turn up a couple of hours ahead, because otherwise you might find that people who've got a flight this afternoon are thinking, right, we better get straight to the airport and add to the queues. So I wouldn't do that. Between 2 and 3 hours probably seems about right. And turning to the trains, yes, we've got problems, particularly with ticketing. All of us who are used to sort of buying tickets online on the way to the station, you may find that that's not working. TransPennine Express, for instance, the intercity company in the north of England, they're saying just buy your ticket on board. So it's a messy, messy day. I hope most people will get where they need to be, but already we're seeing EasyJet cancelling some flights in and out of Gatwick Airport and blaming this IT outage.
Yeah, and I noticed that in Ryanair's statement, they're very keen to apologise to customers for any disruption that they might be experiencing, but they also do say this is a result of a global third-party IT outage. They're very clear that they're part of the same issue. And I guess the problem is, as soon as flights are cancelled, because that admin can't happen perhaps at speed, you then get a backlog and then you get into all sorts of issues, don't you? And perhaps planes being in the wrong place and...
Well, exactly right. I mean, because already I was looking very closely at what was happening with air traffic control, particularly heading to Southeast Europe, to Greece, to Turkey, because we've had loads and loads of really long so-called slot delays where they effectively say the skies are too busy, partly because of Ukraine actually, therefore we are not allowing the normal number of flights to operate. You're going to have to wait on the ground for an hour. Once you've got a couple of those, then you are looking at building up delays. So by the end of this evening, I fear we will see quite a lot of cancellations as planes and pilots and cabin crew are out of position. I hope I'm wrong, because this is absolutely peak time. But wherever you're going, be prepared for delays and disruption and be aware of your rights, which is basically that if an airline cancels a flight for any reason, it has to find you an alternative as soon as possible on any airline that has seats available. Big problem, of course, at the moment is that this is the super peak weekend and there aren't that many spare spaces.
Oh, that's still very good advice. And Simon, you've been covering travel issues for many years now.
Yeah.
For many years. Have you seen anything like this before?
Well, there's always stuff that happens, and it always seems to happen at a really awkward time. And I guess the closest equivalent would be last August bank holiday, when suddenly, again, it was an IT failure. The NATS air traffic control computer broke, so did the backup system. They shut down and we saw absolute chaos that I'm afraid went on for days. That was at the end of the back end of last summer's holidays, and here we are at the start of the peak for this summer's, and things already going wrong.
And have you got a sense at all of the time frame of this? Because we were probably hit here soon after 5 in the morning, things started to happen. But would it at the same time around the world, or was it a staggered
we actually saw
effect?
a kind of prelude to this with problems involving budget airlines in the US, hundreds of cancellations, effectively our time, very late last night and early this morning on Frontier, on Spirit and Allegiant. That was to do with a cloud server issue. That seemed to be resolved, but then we've got fresh problems, and I've been looking, for instance, at Sydney in Australia, where it's now tea time, at Los Angeles early hours of the morning, and things are starting to move. We've had a few cancellations at Sydney Airport, but nothing too serious. So things will get back together, but exactly as you indicate, so much is interconnected, and your flight today going to Alicante, perhaps tonight, might before that be going to France and going to Italy and coming back. And if those start getting delayed, it really does lead to serious problems.
OK, Simon, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. I'm going to bring Ian King back in, who's in the city for us. And really interesting there in listening to how individual passengers might be affected by delays. But of course, this is going to affect businesses hugely, isn't it? Their ability to do their work, but also they'll be transporting goods around the world and relying on transport.
Absolutely. I mean, there are shades of what happened during the pandemic. A while there, we saw massive disruption to supply chains. And actually, I mean, the one thing that you might say about all of this, Anna, that's fairly positive is that I think the pandemic taught some valuable lessons to businesses in terms of supply chain resilience. Obviously, it was something that attracted a great deal of attention. And in particular, this notion of so-called just-in-time delivery. We saw it again, for example, with the disruption in the Suez Canal a couple of years ago, and more recently with the Straits of Hormuz, and the fact that global shipping companies have had to divert their traffic up the west coast of Africa rather than risk going through the Straits of Hormuz and being hijacked or attacked by Houthi rebels. So supply chain resilience, very, very important. But as I say, in particular, this issue of just in time has really been quite rethought quite heavily among a lot of logistics professionals. The notion that perhaps you can't offshore everything, you can't outsource a lot of work to parts in far-flung parts of the world that are away from the centre of operations. So I suspect some businesses will have learned lessons from the pandemic and perhaps put them in better stead as a result of this. But it will certainly be an issue. I mean, one thing that's worth pointing out is that a lot of people work from home as well. So in terms of the disruption to the rail networks in particular, and as we've been reporting, there have been issues with Go via Thameslink services. The city tends to be quite quiet here on a Friday now, so a lot of people will be working from home. And again, these are all sort of post-pandemic changes to the way in which we live and work that may well have had an impact and maybe blunt the impact of the problems that we've had today. I should say, by the way, Anna, while we've been chatting, I understand that there are some issues with the NHS and with the software that GPs use. There is a particular service called EMIS, which stands for Egerton Medical Information Systems. It's the biggest provider of GP booking software to GP surgeries across the land. It's got about 60% market share, and apparently that is down. Looking at social media, that is down right now. It's the software via which patients' appointments are booked with local GP surgeries. Repeat prescriptions can be ordered on this service, and that is, as I understand it, is down right now. So potentially there's going to be a lot of disruption to GP surgeries around the land today as well.
Seeing that as well, Ian, although no official statement from the NHS as yet, but yes, users saying they're experiencing some difficulties booking NHS appointments at some GP services. Also, just to say that the Metropolitan Police have said that they've not been affected and everything is working at the moment, and no issues also reported by the London Fire Brigade. That's some of the better news, but we're getting more and more developments as far as travel is concerned. More reports of trouble in Asia, for example, coming to the surface. Malaysia's railway operator, for example, is having problems with ticketing as well as customer service. And at Singapore's Changi Airport, flights have been delayed, with Air Asia and Vietjet Air flights are also affected. That's according to our Asia correspondent, Nicole Johnson, who's monitoring things there. So clearly a global issue. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell, now. And this programme is looking very different to how it was supposed to look, wasn't it, because of this outage. But we're not the only broadcasters being affected, not the only company being affected. We're seeing transport impacted, possibly GP appointments struggling to be booked. So is the government likely to say anything about this, do you think?
Yeah, we haven't heard much from the government yet, other than to say on that issue around GPs, I've just been told by someone in government that lots of GPs are being affected by this issue. There's been a post that's been put online by one surgery in Barnsley saying that they've got a major issue, no access to clinical systems, a national problem. They've reported it, and they say it's to do with a piece of software called EMIS Web, and that users are unable to access that, and they say that's a third-party issue, so clearly related to this wider problem. When I asked someone in government whether anything was essentially being affected on the health front, they said yes, lots of GPs are being affected as well. So clearly, given you would probably expect, given the widespread nature of how this has impacted us and lots of other organisations, that the state and various bits of the state anyway wouldn't be immune to being affected by this. But fairly worrying if that means that GPs can't carry out or access records, because clearly that will have a knock-on impact on people that are expecting to be able to see their GP and get medical appointments.
Yeah, and I can see that lots of GP surgeries are now reporting issues, so we'll keep across that and see how big the impact is there. In the meantime, Rob, while you're here, you were going to be in Downing Street this morning. It's a big day for Keir Starmer inviting President Zelensky into cabinet. Let's just talk about that for a moment before we go back to the global IT outage.
Yeah, the Ukrainian president has arrived in Downing Street about half an hour ago. Obviously, we can't show you those pictures as yet because of this problem. Warmly greeted by Sir Keir Starmer, though. They had a big hug in Downing Street, and the red carpet had been rolled out up to number 10 and had their sort of photo moment on the doorstep there. And then in about an hour or so's time, we'll get a cabinet meeting. Cabinet doesn't usually meet on a Friday. It's usually a pretty quiet day when even some ministers maybe head back to their constituencies. There'll be what's being termed an extraordinary meeting of cabinet, in which Volodymyr Zelensky will brief ministers about the military situation in Ukraine in the war there, the situation on the battlefield, and will also no doubt appeal for more assistance, more support, essentially continued support from the UK and from the West. There's also been a couple of announcements linked to this from number 10, one about the signing of what they are terming a defence export supply treaty. So essentially trying to sort of link up the defence trade infrastructure between the two countries, UK and Ukraine, a little bit more closely, allowing Ukraine as well to draw on £3.5 billion of export finance, so able to get hold of more arms and weapons, and also an announcement about cracking down on what they call the Russian shadow fleet, essentially oil tankers moving around the world carrying Russian oil. So Keir Starmer very keen to talk about that, but yes, we should see cabinet ministers arriving in Downing Street in the next hour or so, that meeting taking place in an hour or so, where Volodymyr Zelensky will address ministers. So a fairly unusual step, but clearly the government and the Prime Minister keen to, off the back of that European meeting that Volodymyr Zelensky was also at yesterday, keen to include him and involve him in cabinet goings-on in Westminster today as well.
OK, Rob, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's go back then to this breaking news today of the major global IT outage, which is hitting so many businesses worldwide, including us here at Sky News. I'm being told now that it's understood this has not been caused by a cyber attack. The suggestion has been up till now is that it's a system failure believed to have been caused by a flawed antivirus update, but we don't have confirmation of that cause, but that is the suggestion at present. So let's go back to Ian, who's in the city for us this morning. And Ian, we have experienced these blue screens around our office today, but there will be companies all up and down the country who are experiencing the same thing. And I guess just from the number of them who are going public and talking about issues shows just how integrated this problem.
Totally, yes. I mean, the global economy is more interconnected than ever before, and across any industry that you care to look at. We got a flavour of this, Anna, back in 2008 with the global financial crisis. I mean, why did the crisis become global? Well, simply because of the interconnectedness of the financial system around the world, and this notion of contagion, which was very much the buzzword at the time, that really gave you an indication of how interconnected the globe is. And that has become ever more the case, really, with the uptake of the internet. It is very, very widespread as a result of that interconnectivity. We're seeing it across every single industry you talk about. Whilst we've been chatting, Anna, actually, I've got a statement from Luton Airport, which has just come up, which I can read to you. It says, we are aware of an ongoing global IT issue that is impacting checking and boarding procedures for some airlines. We have additional staff on hand to support, and operations are continuing with manual systems. Passengers are advised to check with their airlines for flight updates. So this is another indication of things coming closer to home. We've obviously been reporting reporting throughout the morning on issues, for example, at Berlin Airport, where no one's been able to take off or land. Several of the big US carriers, United, Delta and American, have all grounded their flights right now. You've heard we've been reporting that Ryanair have been telling people to get to the airport 3 hours in advance of their flight. And obviously the aviation sector is particularly vulnerable, you would say, to these sort of IT outages. But if you cast your mind back, Anna, a quarter of a century, if we'd been sat here in 1999, we'd have been talking a lot about the Millennium Bug. That was something that was seen as having a major impact potentially on services systems around the world. The fact that the dates were going to reset from 1999 and so say at the time we're going to reset to zero. And if you remember at the time, there were all sorts of horror stories about planes potentially falling out of the sky. There was no real counterfactual to that because most people spent so much money preparing for that outcome. The IT services industry made an absolute fortune. IT contractors around the world made an absolute fortune from helping companies prepare for the Millennium Bug. And in the end, it didn't turn out to be an issue. There's no counterfactual. We'll never know whether, had that work not gone in, whether you would indeed have seen, for example, planes falling out of the skies, trains grinding to a halt. But that was an early indication, if you like, of the interconnectedness of the global technology system, and that is being proved again today. Some will say, I suspect this might feed into the US presidential debate, because if you look at what J.D. Vance, who was this week picked, of course, as Donald Trump's vice presidential nominee, well, J.D. Vance has been very, very critical of big tech over the past, and in particular, the dominance of these big tech giants. Now, interestingly, J.D. Vance comes from a venture capital background in Silicon Valley. He's been very closely associated with a lot of IT startups. But at the same time, he's also been extremely critical of the dominance of a handful of tech giants around the world. And you can name them. It's Alphabet, the owner of Google, Meta, the owner of Facebook, and of course, Microsoft. In Wall Street, they refer to the Mag 7, these seven big stocks, the Magnificent Seven, these big seven stocks that have dominated the tech sector over the last few years, and into which investors have ploughed trillions of dollars, literally. And I suspect this might raise questions about the dominance of some of these businesses. I mean, Microsoft, of course, in particular, which is closely involved in all of this issue with outages today, Anna. Well, Microsoft is a past master at fending off regulatory pressures, people complaining about the dominance of the Windows service, for example. That was an early battle. But I suspect this will come back to light now. The fact that Azure, Microsoft's cloud service, has been so heavily tied up with this latest outage, which, as I say, is down to a company called CrowdStrike. I suspect people like J.D. Vance will start to talk about the dominance of Microsoft in the global IT infrastructure.
It'll be interesting to see what that kind of reaction is politically as well when we get more information. Let me just reiterate what I was telling you a short while ago. Sky sources say that it's understood that this global outage is not thought to have been caused by a nefarious cyber attack. Tom Clark is back here with me, and everyone will be desperately trying to get to the bottom of what has caused this outage, which has such far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, as far as we know so far, this is a fault affecting Microsoft systems, people running Windows 10. There were problems overnight with Azure, which is Microsoft's big cloud computing provider for businesses. But from what I understand, in the US, that's resolved. It then was a problem affecting people running Microsoft Windows 10 and other bits of Microsoft software on their computers. As far as we understand, and again, we haven't had this confirmed yet, but there is a company called CrowdStrike which provides cybersecurity solutions to protect your networks. They provide services for people running Microsoft Windows, and they did put out a tech alert overnight to engineers who have to look after those systems, saying they're aware of reports of crashes related to the Falcon sensor. This is a piece of software that is designed to thwart cyber attacks, someone trying to make malicious entry to your systems. While updating that software, they say that symptoms include hosts experiencing bug check blue screen error related to Falcon Tensor, and they're saying their engineering teams are actively working on it. We haven't had a formal statement from CrowdStrike, and we're still waiting to hear from Microsoft as well to hear what they have to say about it. But where you have a situation where you have a dominant provider like Microsoft, and don't forget they are the most valuable company in the world at the moment, they are highly dominant in the cloud computing business software space, it's going to have colossal impacts. According to Down Detect, which is an organisation that monitors system outages, it is a global phenomenon. Banks, businesses, payment systems, as you were saying, airline check-ins, news organisations like our own around the world. And as you were just hearing, now GP surgeries are obviously operating similar systems are being impacted as well. And I imagine
it's the booking service for them, doesn't it? That
yeah,
seems to be
there you go.
and
And as we go through the day, I'm sure we'll be hearing more and more of these impacts.
And another reminder of just how dependent we are on technology.
Yes, and how easily disrupted these things can be when things go wrong. And they are incredibly complicated. There are very skilled engineers that manage them. You know, the fact we don't have these outages more often is perhaps surprising. But remember, customers rely on these companies. It's reliability is the biggest thing that they're paying for. So it does raise big questions about that. These things aren't unheard of. I don't know if you remember back in 2020, Microsoft's cloud system went down while they were installing their own software patch, which obviously had an error in it, took the whole system offline, and they recovered. I think it was in 2021, Facebook, WhatsApp, all of Meta's systems were down for at least 24 hours, again, because they were installing a software patch, an update to the system that was flawed and took everything offline, raising big questions internally about, guys, can't you test these things first? Is there a way of doing that? But when you have these systems that are running 24/7, businesses, customers, app users rely on them to be working all the time, a bit like a 24-hour rail network, you've got to try and make those repairs and updates while they're still operating. So it is a risky business.
You're trying to do the repairs, but you're also trying to communicate with customers and with other businesses that you're trading with about your problems as well, and that could be affected too.
So there are going to be big questions for the engineers and the technical folks who run and update these systems as to why something as simple as, from what we understand, bear in mind we're still trying to get to the bottom of exactly what caused it, if it was indeed an update to a bit of cybersecurity software that's managed to take nearly all of Microsoft's, certainly, or parts of Microsoft's customers' systems offline globally in a very short space of time. And as things stand, we don't know how long it's going to take for them to recover.
No, and what have we heard from Microsoft themselves?
We haven't heard. We haven't got through to them yet. No. But we will bring you that as soon as we do. We haven't had an update from them yet.
Interesting to see what they say when that happens. Tom, for the moment, thank you for that. And I'm just noticing a couple more airports are kind of reporting their experiences at the moment. Heathrow Airport, a spokesperson, has also talked about Microsoft experiencing this global outage, which we've been discussing. They say it's impacting select systems at Heathrow. They say flights are operational, though we are experiencing delays. They go on to say we're implementing contingency plans to minimise any impact on journeys, and passengers are advised to check with their airline for the latest flight information. And Gatwick Airport has also said that passengers may experience some delays due to this outage. They say that they're affected by what they describe as the global Microsoft issues, so passengers may experience some delays while checking in and passing through security, but they are suggesting that anyone going to Gatwick should arrive at their normal check-in time, and they do apologise for the inconvenience and are trying to resolve the problem as soon as possible. Let's bring Ian back in, who's our business presenter, of course, who's in the city for us this morning. And I guess that's the other question mark, is just how long this could go on. This is quite hard for businesses, scrambling to do work as normal, but at the same time not having any sense of when it could be fixed.
Absolutely right, Anna. I mean, I think people might take some comfort from the fact that Microsoft has got its Azure cloud-based service up and running again after what appears to have been a relatively short outage for that particular service. And of course, that will be critical to an awful lot of businesses around the world. What we don't really know is the extent to which CrowdStrike's software, as Tom was saying there, it's called Falcon Sensor. We don't know the extent to which that is interlocked with other IT providers around the world. It's certainly very, very closely associated with Microsoft. And as I was saying to you earlier on, Anna, ironically, CrowdStrike has been quite critical of Microsoft over recent months in terms of some of the resilience of its systems. The pair have been working together on a new service called Defender, which is made available by Microsoft. But you can't really stress the significance of CrowdStrike in this endpoint protection, as it's known in the industry. It has roughly a 24% stake, market share in this particular market in terms of cyber security and resilience. It competes with the likes of McAfee, which is again a brand name that some viewers may be familiar with. McAfee's market share is only about 10%. So CrowdStrike is very much the big player in this, which is why it has such important relationships with Microsoft. Interestingly, one thing I should tell you about this business, Anna, because as we now think we can now definitively rule out that this was due to a virus. But CrowdStrike actually made its name. And again, viewers with longer memories will remember this. There was a Russian hacking operation called Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear, which caused all sorts of havoc in around sort of 2009, 2010. And actually, CrowdStrike came to prominence because it identified and nullified those particular threats. Fancy Bear was thought to be a Russian state-backed hacking entity, and it was actually CrowdStrike's software that kept that at bay. And it was one key selling point about when it came to market in 2011. The business was valued at around $11 billion at the time of its flotation. As I said earlier on to you, Anna, it's now worth some $83 billion. I suspect it'll be worth a lot less than that when Wall Street opens later on today. But that was really how the business made its name. It is a very, very key part of IT infrastructure around the world. It's made great play in recent years of its expertise in AI and how it uses artificial intelligence to detect incoming attacks on the software systems of clients. But as you were saying, we don't think this is necessarily a virus. This appears to be a systems upgrade.
OK, and just to give another travel update as well, because one of the areas that's been particularly affected has been airports, and it seems to be the kind of checking in process that seems to have been affected by this global outage. Luton Airport has now put out a statement as well. They are saying that they have been affected, or some of their airlines and operations are affected, but they say that they're continuing with manual systems. They've put a post up on X saying we're aware of the ongoing global IT issue that's impacting check-in and boarding procedures for some airlines. They say they've got additional staff on hand to support, and operations are continuing with manual systems. And they're saying they're advising passengers to check in with their airlines for any flight updates, because some airlines are suggesting getting there earlier than usual. Others say don't get there too early because they're concerned about places getting too crowded. Also, we're told that Asda and Iceland are unaffected. A spokesperson for the supermarket Asda said that it had been unaffected by the outage, and Iceland, the frozen food supermarket, also said it wasn't impacted. And it's interesting to find out who isn't affected. There were supermarkets in Australia that there were reports that they were having problems processing payments, but those two supermarkets have come forward and said that they've not been affected today. Let's bring in Tom Clark again, who's here with me. And for any viewers just joining us now, Tom, may have a few issues doing their normal business today, or may know nothing about it. Get everyone up to date with where we stand.
It is interesting. So this appears to be an outage affecting parts of Microsoft's customer base. So it's not all of their customers running their software. Microsoft 365 seems to be particularly affected. We know there were problems with their Azure cloud computing system overnight, but they say those have been resolved. But we do have widespread global impacts on certain businesses running Microsoft products. Initially, obviously, when you see something of this scale, you always think about whether it was a cyber attack. It seems pretty clear now this is, and we've had statements to that effect, that is not a result of a cyber attack. This is something different as we understand it, and for statements we've seen from a cyber security company called CrowdStrike, which provides software, ironically, to protect Microsoft systems from cyber attack. There certainly was a problem with an update, a patch that they put out for a piece of software that protects servers from attack overnight, and it is being reported at the moment that that was the cause of this outage. It would have been people using that particular piece of software on their Microsoft systems. Microsoft have acknowledged in a statement that there is an impact on parts of their systems globally, but we're awaiting some more details and a statement from them about what's actually going to happen, how long this outage might continue to last for. They're describing it as degradation to the systems, that the use of them is degraded, but they're not calling it an outage. But I think for a lot of people experiencing the impacts of this, that is exactly what it is.
Yeah, I should say at this point that this is completely a prop. It's not working at all. I may as well close it.
Interestingly, my laptop is running fine, so
we
will get to the bottom of
this. No, I'm purely on my phone at the moment.
A large number of our desktop machines here are still showing blue screens, but others are working fine. So. Yeah, we'll try and get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can, via my phone, give you a couple more updates, actually. First of all, the Liberal Democrats are urging the government to call a COBRA meeting in response to what's happened. They want one of these special emergency meetings to coordinate what they want is an urgent response to the IT outage causing what they describe as major disruption, including to airlines, railways and GP surgeries. So that's the Liberal Democrats urging a COBRA meeting to take place. And also we've got a spokesperson for Liverpool Airport has put out a statement as well, giving an update for that airport. They're saying we are seeing an impact. It's affecting some airlines, but not all at check-in. What they're doing is reverting to manual systems. Similarly, we heard that from Gatwick Airport as well, manual check-ins rather than computerised. So they're saying people are still checking in at Liverpool Airport. They're just saying it's just a little bit slower and planes have still been getting away. So their advice for passengers is to still come to the airport, but check with your airline first, they say. And they're also saying we ask for a bit of patience as well as the problem is resolved. They have gone on to give a little bit more detail. They say that a single Dublin to Liverpool flight has been delayed due to an issue in Ireland. So that's the latest from Liverpool Airport. And so, Tom, we're getting lots of updates from airports because obviously a lot of people affected. We were hearing from Simon Calder, the travel editor of The Independent earlier, saying that this is the busiest day of the year to travel by air. It's the beginning of the summer holidays for many people, and so airports would be particularly busy anyway, typically. But it isn't just airlines and airports that are affected. There are some trains, but there are lots of other businesses as well.
It appears to be, if you're running Microsoft Windows, and we're still trying to figure out which, Windows 10 seems to be being named as one of the systems affected. Whether it extends beyond that, we're still trying to figure out. But it's the leading sort of business software in the world. It's why Microsoft is the most valuable company in the world. If you've got that many people using it and your systems go down, it is going to have widespread but also extremely varied impacts. It's being reported, for example, in Alaska, the 911 system seems to be affected. That's their emergency services system. Obviously, here in the UK, having had impacts on our 999 system before, I would imagine they built in a lot more resilience into that system with different types of software providers or mirror sites that allow you to keep operating in the case of an outage like this. But if it's I think the airlines is a great example. The sort of software that you run on aircraft for those mission-critical life and death situations is much more secure. Similarly, the sort of stuff that would run in a hospital or a clinic. But when it comes to the front of house stuff, the check-in software, the display screens at a train station, your booking or ticketing system, it's going to have colossal impacts, and disruption, even though they might not be life and death type systems.
So there's something reassuring about that it's mostly disruption and massive inconvenience and obviously awful for all
From
the
what we can see
businesses.
so far, yes. But when it affects banking and online payments as well, cash payments, we understand there's a number of businesses in the UK that can't take payments at the moment. That's the life of your business, very much so. But as we can see right now, those are the sorts of systems affected. You may have already mentioned this, but I believe the Home Office is saying we don't, as far as we know so far, have any disruption to government systems or the IT that we use there or in the NHS. But again, as you get to the periphery, to the providers, to the check-in systems, and perhaps we'll see more glitches emerge as they go through the day, depending on how long it takes to resolve this outage. We might see some more significant impacts. That's not unreasonable to assume.
And in a story like this, it's interesting to find out who's not experiencing problems as well as who is.
Absolutely.
And reassuring in some cases, certainly. Tom, for the moment, thank you. We can bring in now our correspondent in India, Neville Lazarus, to get us an update on the situation there. So, Neville, how has this global outage affected things there?
Yes, Anna, it has affected here, especially the airlines industry, which we've seen passengers with long queues of passengers in front of the airport. The airlines, Indigo Airlines, AXA Air, SpiceJet, they've all taken out statements telling the passengers to expect delays in checking in, their online services, and to be patient. Now, the airlines have been impacted in various ways. A number of flights have been halted. There's been disruptions. They've been delayed. It's also had an effect on broadcast news organizations. Quite a few of them have been temporarily taken off air or have been disrupted. In their broadcast, newsrooms have shut down because computers weren't working properly. There's been also an effect on hospitals out here. I was speaking to an administrator of a hospital who didn't want to be named because of reasons, saying that their hospital has had an impact, particularly in lab tests. All those ICU machines in ICUs which were on the platform have been disrupted. So yes, in critical care, hospitals, lab tests, etc., all been affected out here. We still haven't heard reports on effects on the banking sector, the stock exchange, cybersecurity, all of those. But I'm sure in the course of time we will hear some sort of disruptions in those sectors as well. But it has had a cascading effect out here in India.
Well, yes, and what's the reaction been from people then, Neville?
Well, the reaction has been people are skeptical. In India, we have a very large number of people using the internet services. With 1.4 billion people, over 600, 700 million people using smartphones and computers and laptops. All of them are skeptical. Now, there is talk of how there should be an alternate, a plan B, to try and come up with something which will secure their data. We still don't know how much data or sort of things that they were working on when this outage took place, how much of that has been affected. But people are skeptical. There is patience among people at the airport. We've seen them standing in queues, but I'm sure there will be a lot of skeptical people now doubting where their data and whether it is the most secure way of working.
OK, Neville, thanks very much indeed for that update on what's happening in India, also affected by this global IT outage. And I'm just seeing that another form of transport is being impacted because anyone who was hoping to get to France via Dover for the school holidays may have to experience delays. It's thought that queues are around 40 minutes long at present, although we're told that border control is able to process traffic. That's according to the Port of Dover themselves. Let's bring Ian King back in, who's in the city. Ian, any updates for us?
I mean, what I would say, Anna, looking at some of the reaction that you're seeing across news websites around the world from IT specialists, I mean, we were chatting about half an hour ago, and I was reminding viewers about the so-called Millennium bug, Y2K bug, as was called at the time, and obviously it was a huge beanfest for the IT support services industry at the time. IT consultants made out like bandits advising companies around the world about how to prevent themselves against this bug, and of course it didn't come to pass. And as I said, there was no counterfactual. We didn't really know whether there would have been a catastrophe because most companies invested very heavily to prevent that outcome. But there seems to be a body of opinion now among IT specialists that this is the kind of thing that we would have seen potentially around Y2K. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is right now the biggest IT outage of all time. I think this is going to be a very, very big moment in history. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration. Bear in mind what I was saying to you earlier. CrowdStrike, one of the key providers of endpoint protection, as it's known in the industry, it has a 24% market share. It's very, very closely linked to Microsoft, the world's biggest IT services company, and accordingly, this is very, very widespread indeed. I don't think you can exaggerate that. I think it's this is the most serious IT outage the world has ever seen thus far.
Ian, thanks very much indeed. If you're just joining us, you're watching Sky News. Let's just get you up to date with our top story here today. And a major global IT outage is hitting businesses worldwide, including here at Sky News. We're getting reports from airports around the world, from airlines around the world, from train companies, and even GP surgery saying there have been problems with people booking in for their services. Just in the last few minutes, we've heard from the Port of Dover saying there are delays there. But just to run through a list of some of this country's airports, Heathrow Airport has said, for example, its flights are operational, but they're experiencing delays. Gatwick have warned that passengers may experience delays. Luton Airport has said that they're being affected by the outage as well, affecting some of their airlines. Stansted, Manchester, Liverpool and Edinburgh Airport all putting out statements saying to expect some longer waiting times because some of their airlines are being hit by problems. So let's bring in Tom Clark, who's been monitoring the situation to get us the very latest now. And Tom, we've been talking about the possible causes of this. Where are we at with that? Because have we had any formal statements yet to definitively say what's behind this outage?
Well, we know Microsoft has communicated that that people using Microsoft Windows, Microsoft 365 are experiencing disruption, that it is going to be some time before that is resolved. We're still trying to find out a little bit more detail from them as to exactly who is being affected and how long it is going to take to recover. I think that is that's the question most people want answered right now. But what is clear is just the scale and the number of various systems affected around the world, number of businesses and users of their products. Interestingly, we were talking about emergency services earlier. I think we've had an update from the fire service here in the UK saying there's been no disruption to their call system or that emergency network. So,
and the Metropolitan Police I think also said
as we'd like to hear in these sorts of situations, that those systems are not affected by this kind of outage. And there has been much discussion. In fact, the incoming government recognising after cyber attacks taking, quite small cyber incidents taking down large amounts of the NHS in London recently, that resilience to these sorts of occurrences, which are every day in the world of cybersecurity and network engineering, that they don't have this kind of global, widely distributed impact.
But important to say that Sky sources are saying that we don't think this is as a result of a cyber attack by a bad actor.
That's right.
That's the suggestion.
The indications at the moment seem to be that this was a software update by a cybersecurity firm that offers protection to users of Microsoft systems, a company called CrowdStrike. There was a flaw in a piece of software that they've obviously put out, or maybe not even a flaw, just maybe it was put in the wrong place from the wrong time, that has been, certainly from an update from them, they're certainly saying they've got a problem with it. They recognise that and they're working to fix it. Whether it's the sole cause of this entire disruption, we're still trying to establish, but there are indications that this was a bit of routine maintenance, effectively, that has gone badly wrong and impacted the servers behind these systems that we use in our day-to-day lives, in our newsroom here at Sky, airport check-ins, and train companies and all the rest who are being impacted as well. GP surgeries we're talking about.
Many others experiencing that blue screen that we all saw at about 5:20 or something like that, 5:30 this morning, with lots of computers not working, and then lots of other technology here as well.
And I wouldn't want to speculate about how long this is going to take to recover from, but where we've seen these things in the past, so not too long ago, I think it was 2021, 2022, when Meta introduced a software patch and update, they managed to take Facebook, WhatsApp, and other Meta apps offline, and that impact lasted for an entire day, 24 hours. It was a significant major impact that took them a long time to recover, and went down in history as one of the most sort of costly own goals in cyber history, effectively, and it does give us pause and make us think about how we become increasingly dependent on systems, not monopolies, but when you have only maybe 5 big tech companies providing most of the services we all use on a day-to-day basis, when you see the largest of them impacted by something like this, there are significant global impacts. And that is a reason to sit and wonder how, as more and more of our data, more and more of our daily lives are run through single pieces of software architecture, where that leaves us.
And it's the experience of many people up and down the country today, but obviously Sky News will look different today because we are experiencing these problems as well, as we were saying, problems with our computer systems. We had some very clever technical people coming in and managed to get us on air, but we are limited in what we can do, and we apologise for that, but we're trying to get more and more services online to bring you the full experience. But we've got Ian King, so we're in good shape. He's in the city for us this morning. So Ian, give us your reaction. I mean, you were telling us this a little bit. You were talking a little bit about your analysis just a few minutes ago, but just to give your sense of the scale of this issue, I can't keep up with the number of reports I'm getting in from airports around the world, from airlines, from companies who are saying they're experiencing some problems. What do you make of the scale of it?
Yes, Anna. I said before the top of the hour to you, I think it is not exaggerating to say that this is the biggest IT outage the world has ever seen. This is on a scale that we have not yet experienced. We've had IT outages in various isolated measures in the past, but as Tom was just saying, it really highlights not only the interdependence of the global IT infrastructure we have, but also the fact that only a handful of big tech companies really dominates this scene. And to recap, the reason we think this has happened is because of a software upgrade to a piece of software called Falcon Sensor, which is made by a company called CrowdStrike. It's a US-listed business worth some $83 billion. It came to fame when it identified the hacking threat from the Russian-backed Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear organisations, which, if you remember at the time, had infiltrated the Democrat National Committee in the United States. So it goes back to that story about Russia interfering with the US elections process. CrowdStrike identified that threat and nullified it, and on the back of that, they floated on the Nasdaq. They were valued at $11 billion at the time. That was back in 2011. They're now, as I say, valued at $83 billion, and they are a very, very big player indeed in the world of cybersecurity. The Falcon Sensor claims to be able to use artificial intelligence to identify incoming threats to the service IT systems of its clients, and it has a 24% stake share in that market known as endpoint protection, competing with the likes of McAfee, another well-known name, but CrowdStrike are a substantially bigger player than that, and very, very closely and intimately linked, of course, with Microsoft, a key business partner with whom it has collaborated in the past, most recently on a product called Defender. And the fact that Microsoft is such a dominant player is why this has become such a widespread thing. I suspect when the dust has settled from all of this, Anna, you will see calls from regulators around the world and indeed from politicians around the world saying, how do we stop this happening again? Are the big software companies, the big tech companies, just too dominant in the field? Have they got too much power? Have they got too much control? Because this has clearly tested the resilience of global IT infrastructure quite considerably. Just to let you know about another update that I've seen, very, very important one, this, when you're talking about resilience and resilience for the overall economy in this country. National Grid's electricity systems operator, which obviously balances supplies of electricity around the grid, it's put out a statement saying it's been unaffected by this, so that is good news. And the statement reads, we are aware of the global issue impacting Microsoft. There has been no impact to electricity system operator IT systems as a result of the global Microsoft's outage. Our ability to operate the electricity system and supply electricity remains unaffected. Our engineers have been and continue to monitor the situation closely. So a piece of good news there. I mean, it seems, Anna, from the various updates that we're getting around the world, there are a couple of key areas that seem to be affected most severely. Aviation is obviously a key one. The main US aviation regulator, the FAA, has said it's had requests from 3 of the main carriers over there, United, Delta and American, to ground all flights right now. We know that, for example, Berlin Airport has prevented airports from takeoff and landing. The latest update I've had is from KLM, the Dutch flag carrier, obviously now part of Air France KLM, one of the big pan-European airlines, and they have been grounding flights as well. It appears at a very localised level, Anna, to be affecting ticketing and check-in procedures. Obviously, that is a very IT-intensive area. Turkish Airlines is another carrier that has said that it's having issues getting some of its customers to check in. And that's accordingly why anyone who is due to fly today is being urged to contact the airlines before travelling. I suspect you could see a situation where a lot of airports around the world look pretty chaotic in fairly short order. One observation I would make, Anna, you were talking earlier on about the financial services infrastructure, and I've been talking throughout the morning here about some of the problems, for example, that we've had at the London Stock Exchange, and in particular their ability to get regulatory announcements out to the market in a timely manner. Although trade has resumed as trading is carrying on as normal, shares are changing hands right now. But to the point about financial transactions, I would say this could have been even worse had it happened at the end of the month, because obviously towards the final few days of the month, big employers start to run their monthly payrolls, very, very automated system, very, very heavily dependent on IT systems. And one could say that were this to have happened this time next week, for example, that could have caused absolute chaos in terms of getting workers' salaries out to them in a timely manner. And that would have obviously all sorts of knock-on effects. One other observation I would make, Anna, is that bear in mind what I've been saying about CrowdStrike. This software is all about preventing attacks on IT systems. And I wonder whether a knock-on effect from this will be bad actors around the world now, whether state entities or individual private malicious individuals trying to potentially extort money from businesses by hacking into their systems. Well, if this software is currently out of action, or to combat, then potentially that is a green light for bad actors to come in and start trying to attack the IT systems of companies and government entities around the world. So potentially that would be a bit of a knock on there. I would not be surprised to see over the next 24 hours if we start getting updates from, as I say, both state entities and from individual corporations saying, well, we've had a hacking incident as a result of our main software going down. I think that could be a secondary impact, if you like, of what we're seeing just now.
Really interesting. Yeah, we'll have to look out for that, won't we? And you were talking about one of the main impacts being airports. Let me just get you up to date with some of the latest from them. We've got a statement from Heathrow now saying that the airport's putting in contingency plans to try to minimise the effects of this outage. They say that flights are operational. They say we are implementing contingency plans to minimise any impact on journeys. Passengers are advised to check with their airline for the latest flight information. Bristol Airport as well, another one to put out a statement. They say some of its retailers are unable to accept card payments, and they're advising their passengers to check with their airlines before travelling as well. And also, as far as the health sector is concerned, the National Pharmacy Association has confirmed an IT outage is disrupting community pharmacies. They say that there is an issue with some community pharmacies accessing the prescriptions from GPs and medicine deliveries. They say that they're being disrupted, and they are urging patients to be patient while visiting their pharmacy, and they're urgently raising the issue with the NHS. So that's the National Pharmacy Association saying that the outage is disrupting community pharmacies. And one more update for you on the issue of health. Some GP practice websites are having some problems. A lot of them are showing the message, we're affected by a third-party issue that's impacting organisations globally. Our IT support is working with the relevant parties to restore service as soon as possible. They say we don't have access to our clinical systems and will be providing a skeleton service only. So some patients will unfortunately be turned away. So that's how it's affecting GP surgeries. I'll come to EasyJet in a moment because I want to bring in Tom Clark, but EasyJet are also giving out some advice for customers. Well, I can do it briefly. They're advising customers to arrive 3 hours early. And that seems to be a lot of the statements that we're getting are from airlines, aren't they? Tom, I don't know if you've noticed a similar trend.
And absolutely, we've heard people advise from some airports to, just don't come to the airport or check before you travel, delay your arrival. I think what we can interpret from that, they can get passengers on and off planes. They're just having to come up with a workaround. A bit like we saw with the NHS during the cyber attack on London hospitals, they have to, just bear in mind this isn't a cyber attack that we're dealing with here, but this is a similar IT outage. You have to switch to kind of pencil and paper, old school methods of checking, ticketing, printing. So it's the delays that are causing the disruption. But for other businesses, like our own, you have to come up again with a workaround, but the overall impact is much more critical than that. Certainly if you're running payments through the system and you're a business, that's a whole different thing as well. And we've seen, although I don't think we've had an update from Govia yet, but the impacts on rail are also going to be quite profound.
It was thought all 4 of the Govia Thameslink brands were experiencing problems, certainly.
Yeah.
I don't know, as you say, that was a while ago. I haven't had an update since.
We don't know yet whether those trains are running and they're subject to delays or whether it's a system more profound than that. I'd imagine again, it's more likely to be their ticketing, booking or display sort of systems that have been impacted rather than the software that actually operates the trains themselves. I mean, just while you were talking to Ian there, I mean, his speculation and not unreasonable speculation that cybersecurity could be compromised. You might see people trying to exploit this. I might counter that by saying at the moment, because everyone's systems are down, it's not a particularly easy time to get in. Just on that, though, while we're sort of, and other businesses are having to cope with this fallout, there are a lot of IT engineers sweating profusely at keyboards right now, trying to get their businesses up and running. But the same goes for CrowdStrike, who are the provider of security software for Microsoft's Windows systems that seem to have been the cause of this. There's an update from their chief engineer saying there is a faulty channel file. And he's tweeting to people in the business that there's a workaround. I won't read you the workaround. It's very technical. It's all in code. But he then says the workaround won't help everyone, and I've got no further actionable help to provide at the minute. So there are people there frantically trying to figure out what's gone wrong with the piece of software that they put out there. and figure out a way of trying to fix it. So we're still looking at a situation that has not been resolved as far as we can tell from the software point of view. We are waiting for more details from Microsoft, and we're trying to chase them. Interestingly, I've just been on Microsoft's web pages trying to find any updates they're providing to technical people, and I can't get on. So perhaps, being Microsoft, they're as affected as everybody else.
Yeah, and that customer service angle, it seems to be impacted greatly across the board, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We were talking about how so many airlines and airports are affected by this. Interestingly, though, the air traffic control provider, NATS, has said it's unaffected by IT outage, which will be a relief for everybody because obviously safety is, everyone is concerned about. And at the moment, it seems to be the practical issue of computer systems checking people in that seems to be the problem as far as we know. But the fact that the air traffic control seems to be working normally will be reassuring to
And I think it's fair to say it's a problem that's long been recognised. When you need a system with resilience and a safety critical system like the 999 network or the air traffic control systems, they need to be resilient in case of one part of their system going down, because that's fairly well established principle in the world of IT. You'd certainly hope people like air traffic control aren't affected when Microsoft Windows goes down, and it's good to hear that indeed that appears to be the case.
Absolutely. Let's get a view on this now. I can talk now to Roger Whitefield, who's a former member of the Civil Aviation Authority. Roger Whitefield, thanks so much for talking to us. What's your reaction to what you're hearing this morning?
Because it's worldwide, it is such an embarrassment to everybody. Not because it's gone wrong, but because it means that everybody's fallback procedures are being tested. The good news is that aeroplanes are still flying and are unaffected. Also, the last bit that we heard from NATS, that the air traffic control system is robust, is also the really good news in this story. The bad news is for all those people who are probably losing their patience standing outside terminal buildings, wondering whether they'll ever get to check in. We have a system in aviation which is safety and security bound. In this case, it is the security side of it which is going to cause the delays at the airport. Checking in manually takes a very long time. Producing load sheets for the aircraft manually takes a very long time. In fact, everything that we rely on from IT systems takes a very long time to do manually. And so, although the aviation system is safety contained, it does mean that when things go wrong, things take a long time to do. I am no IT man, so I have no idea what the problem is and how it arrived. I've heard what has been said on the media, but it's really the scope of it all. Last night I wanted to watch the highlights from the golf on Sky. I couldn't. And so the whole thing really goes across the whole gamut.
Well, that's
Aviation.
Right. It's made us realise how integrated we are. Sorry to interrupt. I thought you'd finished there, Roger. Apologies. But yeah, you were talking about how...
caused by a change, a software upgrade. Yeah. And the one thing that aviation does is it doesn't introduce new things until it is tested. It has a system where everything has to be on a level par. You have to have the same maps, you have to have the same frequencies, you have to have everything else. And so new things are introduced on a 28-day AirX cycle, which means that they are tested beforehand and you don't make any changes except on a set date. Sorry.
No, we really appreciate your input, Roger Whitefield. Thanks very much indeed. And you've really painted a picture of some of the delays that may be caused with that kind of manual check-in process that will take so long. But Roger Whitefield, former member of the Civil Aviation Authority, thanks very much indeed. So let's bring Tom Clark back in now. And we're just getting a sense of the scale, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it's we're also getting a sense of time scale too, because it appears that different time zones were hit potentially at different times. Is that right? Or is that just that certain areas were awake at different times?
I have to admit, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So we know that yesterday evening, Microsoft Azure, which is their cloud computing system, reported problems. There were outages that then seemed to extend into Windows 10, Windows and 365 operating systems on their computers, affecting users across the east coast of the US. That was being reported. But was that just because of the timing of this, and whether people are just waking up to the blue screen of death and their IT department in meltdown trying to figure out what is going on? We're still trying to establish that timing, or whether CrowdStrike, who are introduced, who provide this software, Falcon Shield, to Microsoft Windows systems, were putting out their update across the network over a different timescale, and we've seen the kind of wave of that bit of software going around and causing those impacts. That's still unclear, but from what I can establish, just looking at the sort of the tech speak on social media and other sources, is that they are still trying to figure out what's gone wrong and figure out a workaround that they can offer to people in businesses or at Microsoft itself to get some kind of fix to this problem as quickly as possible and get everyone up and running. But for the time being, it seems that the disruption is going to continue, unfortunately.
Yeah, everyone eager to hear an update because
Absolutely.
so many people affected. And I'm going to bring Ian back in now, who's in the city for us today. And Ian, I'm noticing that we've talked a lot about travel companies being affected, but now football clubs as well. Manchester United, we're told, amongst football clubs affected with the release of tickets. And I think other clubs around the English Football League reporting problems as well as Scottish top flight clubs such as Hearts and Hibernian also posting to say that they've been affected by the outage. So many different companies. Give us an idea of what you're gathering is the sort of scale of this.
Yeah, well, as I said to you earlier, it's absolutely huge. When you consider that CrowdStrike, whose software is at the heart of this outage, has a 24% share of its market, it's going to be very, very widespread indeed. If you want to boil that down into simple terms, Anna, it means that roughly a corporate's got a 1 in 4 chance of being affected by this, or a state-owned entity as well. I mean, we've been talking, for example, about GP surgeries. Well, the main provider of software to GP surgeries in terms of appointment bookings, repeat prescriptions and so forth is a business called Emis, and that appears to have been hit by that. So on that basis, if you just look at simple market share terms, you'd say, well, getting on for 2/3 of GP surgeries are going to be affected by this morning. Constant updates rolling in from all of the big names. Our sister channel, CNBC, has just reported that Allianz, the German insurer, one of the world's biggest insurance companies, is the latest company to say they're affected. They say we're currently experiencing a major outage that's impacting employees' ability to log on to their computers. It affects multiple companies besides Allianz, specifically affecting the Windows login, and is caused by an incident at our provider, CrowdStrike. And mentioning Allianz, Anna, makes me wonder what the implications of this is going to be for the insurance sector in particular, because clearly people are going to be impacted by this in all sorts of areas of the economy, as you've just been discussing, not least aviation. The schools are breaking up this weekend. This is going to be an immensely busy time for air travel, for cross-channel travelling. Will people be able to claim on their insurance for delays and disruption? Will this, for example, be declared a force majeure, which would get a lot of the insurers off the hook? So the knock-on effects of this are going to be absolutely huge. I mean, particularly, if you talk about aviation, the business, as you were discussing with Simon Calder earlier, when airlines are disrupted, where flights are cancelled, well, it's a case of getting the aircraft from point to point in order to take their next group of passengers back. And if obviously an initial flight is, if you're flying from London to Malaga, for example, well, that's going to affect the return journey for people who are hoping to come back from Malaga to, say, Stansted or Gatwick Airport. So there will be enormous implications of this. And as I say, the insurance companies will be looking at this very nervously as well and wondering to what extent they're going to have to pick up the tab. It's going to be absolutely hugely widespread.
Absolutely, and so many potential knock lock-ons, as you say. Just in the last few minutes, I've noticed that our data analysts are looking at the information, trying to kind of gauge the scale geographically of this. So they've been looking at a map provided by an internet monitoring company called Thousand Eyes, and they say that applications and networks have reported outages on all continents. The map shows a particularly high number of reported outages in Europe, the United States and Australia. And also they've been looking at Google search data as well, which gives a further insight into the scale of the problem. And according to Google Trends, searches for the term blue screen have spiked globally. And that refers to the blue screen and text displayed on affected machines, something that we've seen a lot of around our office this morning. So that gives you a sense of the geographical spread of this IT outage. So let me just show you the picture from Berlin Airport right now. As we say, Europe particularly affected according to that data analysis just now. So there's the scene at Berlin Airport, a lot of people there, and clearly I would say more people than usual, but obviously it's difficult to know. It's a busy day for travel on a Friday ahead of a holiday period. But I am just reading an eyewitness note from our producer in Berlin who's talking about long lines there at that airport. He's saying that there are families who are quite confused, wandering around trying to get information about their flights, and airport staff, trying to provide it where they can. They say that departures resumed from Berlin Airport from 10 o'clock this morning after technical glitches had been resolved, but flights have been cancelled well beyond that point as well. So clearly a bit of frustration there in Berlin. So what about the situation in Asia? We can cross to India now, and our correspondent Neville Lazarus is there for us. So Neville, how has India been affected by this outage then?
Anna, the most visible effects of this global outage we've seen at airports. There's been long lines and queues of passengers. Airlines have told passengers to come much earlier because they have network systems. There's been flights that have been interrupted and delayed. They've said that there will be delays in check-ins and at the security, etc. So for passengers to come much in advance, we've seen long queues in front of the airport, just similar to Berlin, as you were talking about. Airlines, domestic airlines, Indigo Airlines, SpiceJet, Aksa Airlines, all taking out statements much earlier, a few hours ago, saying that there has been disruptions and asked for passengers to be patient when they are flying out. Now, we've also seen broadcasters in India. There's been interruptions of their channels. They've been off air for a while. Newsrooms have had to shut down because their computers, laptops were not working. I've also had a talk with an administrator in a hospital saying that the hospital, he didn't want to be named because of reasons. He said the hospitals have had disruptions, especially in lab tests, in machines that were attached in the ICU and critical care, and therefore there was lots of disruptions, and people were very uncomfortable with that. We've had just in the last hour from the minister on X saying that the government has been in touch with Microsoft. They are trying to resolve it, but the government infrastructure has not been affected by this outage. So a lot of skepticism out here.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Neville, for getting us up to date there. As we say, updates coming in all the time, not just from around the world with Neville's update there, and we saw the situation at Berlin Airport, but also obviously in this country, a lot of airports being affected. But people keen to know as well how the NHS might be impacted. I know that Tom Clark, who's here with me, has got a bit of an update on that.
We've just had an update from NHS England. According to a spokesperson, the NHS is aware of a global IT outage and an issue with EMIS, an appointment and patient record system, which is causing disruption in the majority of GP practices. But they say the NHS has long-standing measures in place to manage disruption, including using paper patient records and handwritten prescriptions. and the usual phone systems are working to contact your GP. There's currently no known impact on 999 or emergency services, which was what we understood, but it's interesting to hear that confirmed from the health service as well, and people should use those services as normal. But of course, patients should only go to the GP if it's urgent, today of all days, and to use 111 services if they've got any queries that they might have or any health concerns. But obviously, if it's an emergency, dial 999 as usual. Speaking of paper records, I was just looking at some pictures online of people in India boarding flights with handwritten boarding passes. I imagine we might be seeing that fairly soon at UK airports. I haven't seen the evidence of that. But again, people reverting to pen and paper to get around the
I know the
IT
feeling,
systems on
Tom.
the front. Here we are. Yeah.
So, and just to remind people who are just tuning in to Sky News, you may notice that we do look slightly different today because we too have been caught up in this major global IT outage. We have had our computers down since the early hours. Well, I say early hours this morning. It's probably soon after 5 that we started experiencing problems. We were unable to get on air at all. Gradually, we've managed to work around, which I think other companies are probably trying to do as well, because the system is not globally fixed. There are people still working on that, and we don't know the full extent of it as yet either. But just to let you know that things do look a little bit different, and I too am working off paper and a phone at the moment. So we'll try to keep you up to date, though, with all the news as we get it. And as we say, it is a global issue. We can actually get an update now from Beijing. Sky's Nicole Johnson is there for us now. So Nicole, get us up to date with what's happening in your part of the world then, how you're affected.
Well, first of all, Australia. That was one of the first countries where we started to hear about this problem. The reports came out quite quickly, being picked up by the media. And in fact, it was the media in Australia that was heavily affected. Commercial network, Channel 10, it was down. Sky News Australia, off air. The country's national broadcaster, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, large parts of that network went down as well. So much like Sky UK, they had to go to various sort of forms of emergency broadcasting. They are starting to get some of it back on air now. Aside from that, all sorts of problems across Australia. Also reports of difficulties trying to pay in shops, in supermarkets. Reports on social media about that. A great deal of frustration from Australians who had gone to the shops on a Friday afternoon to shop up, to stock up just ahead of the weekend. Also some Australian banking, as we've heard, and flights. Reports of big delays at Sydney Airport, Melbourne Airport. These are major airports in Australia. It seems that flights are still going, but they're seriously delayed. The main Australian airline that's been affected at this stage appears to be Virgin Australia. Throughout the rest of the Asia-Pacific region, the impact is far more patchy. Big problems in Hong Kong at the international airport there. Now, the flights, again, are managing to get out. Big delays, and apparently they're having to use this hand checking in system that we have heard a number of airlines are having to resort to. So that does seem to be one of the major problems. The government in Australia has released a statement, of course, telling people that they understand their concern. A statement on X by the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Emergency meetings are underway to try and deal with it there. Also reports of problems in Singapore. Now, in Singapore, it has affected the post office service there, and again, big delays at Changi Airport, one of the biggest